So yeah, I wore the kimono just for you guys.
Aw, thanks.
Stop it.
Oh, you.
Wait, what did we do to deserve this? You better be sending us that kimono after this.
Ooh, that's a tough
Dude,
sell.
He's like, excuse
That's
me?
a big ask.
That's a very big ask. But I
I'll
mean,
buy-
I'll buy my own. She's like, we'll match.
We'll have
just in
twinsies
spirit.
on.
that would be great. And then we can do like a kimono dance. Whatever
Yeah,
whatever that is.
I guess. Yeah.
You can make it up. That's the beauty of
I
kimono.
guess.
Fucking
We-
TikTok.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That would be the next big TikTok dance. We like take all
I don't
the.
even.
Yeah, me neither.
Meanwhile, we're all quantum mechanics, philosophy. It's like brainwash.
That's what TikTok does, basically.
Yeah,
It's
no,
like,
I
big concept. Let me dance about it.
I do not have TikTok. I fear TikTok.
Yeah, it's
I had a
never
dream
been.
the other day of deleting all of my apps on my phone, and in my dream it was like they're literally watching you. The government is watching you through these apps, and it was like my Uber app, and so I like deleted my Uber app in my dream and a couple other ones that I didn't recognize.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what.
That's an intense dream.
Yeah, it was interesting.
You know, this is very interesting, and I think we're going to get right into it here, and try and
yeah.
like go through the darkness with all of the light and happy, fluffy funniness, because that's what you guys do, right? Is like this sort of spiritual comedy podcast, which is really fun, and it's very. I have this kind of question for just on that subject of, like the sort of the mass monitoring, the conspiracies about, the implants, the microchips, and the
Oh my gosh.
there's this woman I saw on she's a doctor who did a Facebook live stream the other day, who was talking about the vaccine for COVID that they're working on, and how it would have this ability to kind of these like nanoparticles that they've produced that can actually like register your body's vibration and like send it to the cloud and stuff. And it's like, that's very interesting, especially because Bill Gates actually has a patent 060606
Yeah.
that turns people into cryptocurrency. And that's very interesting. But
What about like our social security numbers? I've heard that as well.
well, the thing is it's like, why is that necessary when everyone has a cell phone, which is already monitoring all of that stuff anyways? Like,
I think that came before it though. I think now we have this other option, I think. I don't know. I've been hearing a lot of really scary stuff about technocracy. And I mean, in other countries, really big, other well-known countries that have like these mass monitoring systems where you can't, unless you have your phone on you, you have to have your phone on you, and you're not able to do anything without it. Like it's literally like an absolute necessity. They say no, you have to have a certain personal code, like a certain color. It's like a credit rating, I guess, but they won't let you like do anything without it.
Well, I wonder too, and on the vaccine level, if by using it in a vaccine way, it breaks the poverty gap because people can get the vaccines, but not everyone can get the phone.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. They're like, nope, even the poor people.
But you know what I mean? Like that adds a whole other layer in on that way of it takes it to a different place. I don't know why it's necessarily, but that is another layer of it.
And you have tons of people that are going to refuse to take the vaccine too, though. And I wonder what that's going to look like.
Well, I mean, right. Like if they make it mandatory, and this gets into the whole QAnon thing, because there's actually interviews now with Joe Biden being like, well, if the scientists say it should be mandatory, then I'm with them, and of course on the other side, Trump's like, oh, it's not a problem, so it's crazy. It's a crazy landscape. It's so interesting.
What do we do, you guys?
Well,
we meditate.
I mean, yeah, it seems our methods of fighting back, quote unquote, it's not really fighting. No. I'm very curious to see where things go though, because it seems as though like for a large chunk of humanity, I'm starting to really like look at this and say, we want to facilitate this shift in consciousness. At the same time, it seems like, I mean, maybe that's my perspective. Maybe that's your perspective. Maybe that's this whole, a lot of spiritual people's awareness on the subject. But then you go and talk to most people and they don't really care. And it's kind of like, oh, well, maybe, I mean, we shouldn't be like trying to play the savior role, trying to, like
wake them up,
wake everybody up. If they don't want to be awake, maybe for like 90% of the population. I'm not trying to fuel conspiracies here or anything like that, or darkness, but it's like maybe if 90% of the population wants to be microchipped and go down that road, get vaccines and this whole thing. Maybe that's just like, that's the path. That's what's laid out for them. And because they're not looking at everything. And then again, on the other side, maybe we're actually the ones who are insane. Maybe there really is no conspiracy, and all of it's just this fear that like we've been brainwashed with, you know, like we have to be aware of the whole spectrum of possibilities, even if it is a little awkward that the vaccine apparently has luciferase in it. That's an enzyme. No joke. It's weird. It's weird.
We can talk about Lucifer too. That's, you know, there's some optimistic parts of that. It's a lot more in depth than people think it is, but I'm not going to get into that shit right now.
I mean, we can literally go anywhere.
I think you're right. I think that's kind of a philosophy talking about like how 90% of the people, like we have a mission that we kind of have been born with and that we're trying to work with. And we feel like we need to help other people see this thing, but that these other people, like they may never see it. And I think I've been using that philosophy in other parts of my life. Like, I don't know, questioning like, what are we doing and why are we doing this? And how, like, are we supposed to be pushing forward, you know?
Yeah.
Which I would hope so.
Well, and I appreciate the call out of like the savior role too, because oftentimes like our roles, yeah, we might want to help people, but we're only going to help the people that want to be helped. Right. Like forcing it down on others is not part of their path or even our path. And like, it's that openness to it. And you could be right. Maybe we're the ones that are crazy and have the other side and are thinking about all these things that are driving us up the wall and
we're experiencing it,
but we are experiencing it in a different way.
I can't be like pretend like we're not psychic or pretend like we're not, you know,
that's not how that works.
Right. Be like, I guess that's what that friction can only get worse there.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Have you guys ever seen the movie called They Live?
No.
We recently did a hidden spirituality on it. It's literally about a guy who discovers these sunglasses. When he puts them on, he sees like every magazine, billboard, TV, everything says like, it just goes all black and white, and it's like obey, you know, consume, reproduce, and get married, and like follow the system, don't ask questions. And like that's all of what the media is. And then there's these like aliens walking around who are actually like, they, you know, look like people without the glasses. You put on the glasses and you're like, there's aliens all around us all the time. And has sort of brainwashed humanity. But the reason I bring it up is because there's this like, I think it's only like 5 or 6 minutes, this like fight scene in the movie, but it feels like it's 15 minutes of one guy, the main character with the sunglasses, trying to get his friend to put them on. He's like, just put on the sunglasses. And the guy's like, no, I will not get involved in your crazy antics. And there's like this like 6 minute fight scene of this guy trying to force his friend to wear the sunglasses. And it has that frequency of like, well, you know, you can't force another person to wake up. The funny thing is at the very end, he wins, he gets the sunglasses on his friend starts seeing the aliens and everything. And it's just like, okay, what the fuck is going on? You know, like they're freaking out. And then he wakes up and then they go on this big adventure to save the day. And so that, in my mind, is like there's like a two, you know, polarizing perspectives at play of like, forcing someone to wake up versus letting them walk their own path, but like the necessity of waking up sort of thing. Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting scene, and just like the conversation in general, I think. But I agree with you on what you said of like, you know, if there's a boat that it has tipped over and a bunch of people in the water, and then there's a helicopter and then the divers come down to save them, the rule is save the people who are swimming towards you, right? You can't just go and lift everyone up. You have to, you know, help those who are coming for help. And I think that's a valuable thing as well to bring into the equation.
We also can't discredit the impact that our vibration and raising our own vibration has on other people too, to subconsciously speak to them on a cellular level and an energetic level to cause that impact as well. So it's sometimes less than just, hey, put on the sunglasses. It's more, my vibration is so high and I've done all of this self-work and now my cells are speaking to your cells, my energy speaking to your energy. And all of a sudden people around you are waking up the same way.
I could see that absolutely, thinking about like how they say that's like a lot of how crystals work as well, or where you have this really strong, structured, energetic vibration. And so you match it. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, and I guess it depends on how strong it is. You can be brought down as well, but I can absolutely see that.
Or any blocks or whatever you have in place as well, like in your field. But
yeah. Well, that's what they often describe at Rhythmia, like after the ayahuasca ceremonies, is the shamans will sometimes, you know, kind of give a little closing ceremony talk. And a common idea that comes up in those spaces is that when you do that work, you're making a space, you're making room for other people to do the same. And Jerry, the founder of Rhythmia, explained this in the ayahuasca documentary that we filmed with him, and he's in it towards the end. And he says, you know, it's like this, he described it as the castle of divinity, this sort of like, you know, like the the giant energetic pyramidal structure of all of creation. But that, like, you know, it's like, let's say we're all vibrating at this level, but if one person elevates up here, then that creates a space of where they were, and then someone else can fill that space. And as that person goes higher, then that keeps making space for others to follow. And then imagine that happening with everybody all the time. You know, it's just a matter of everybody continuing to elevate, because it's continually making like almost this vacuum for other people to come in under them and experience those next levels of consciousness for them. And that's I don't know, it's just a really good idea that really speaks to what you just described with like, my cells are talking to your cells on this energetic vibrational level. And yeah.
I've actually channeled something very similar to that before. Like I've seen that in meditation and channeling, of a very similar image of the way that it works when we pull up, like when we vibrate high and we pull people into the space, and it's like more than one person goes into the space that a person vacates, and it like fills in more and more and more. So it's really interesting.
And maybe that's the point. Maybe that's kind of what we're talking about. I mean, I think that there's been, I mean, what about the story of the Rainbow Warriors or the Rainbow Children that were prophesied to come in and be the people that kind of hold that vibration for everyone else to kind of come up to it. I wanted to say something really quickly on the idea of the movie you're talking about, They Live, where he puts on the glasses and he sees things. There's been a philosophy that I've come across a few times saying that Hollywood working incredibly, I mean, like that could get really weird, and not that I'm going to go with the whatever theories there are around Hollywood, but they're talking about how Hollywood actually, because it creates and it directs our mainstream consciousness, and that they play along with these kind of ideas in movies. They portray and they introduce certain topics into the mainstream consciousness to see how we react. And they say like a lot of things on Disclosure, that they say that like a lot of these movies, they come out and they see how we react. I mean, look at World of the Worlds back in the 50s, and they're, you know, when they came out.
Great.
So it went great. But they're like trying to do it a little bit more. And I believe, I mean, look at us. We're raised on freaking post-apocalyptic fiction, and we are ready to learn how to shoot bows so that we can protect ourselves from the government. I don't know.
Shooting bows with today's technology.
I was just going to say, cue Hunger Games whistle.
Okay. Excuse me? Right.
You know, it's so interesting though that you bring it up, because as far as Hollywood goes, you know, I feel and look at it kind of like a double-edged sword in the sense that, you know, like the Hollywood, even the name itself, the holly tree and the holly branch was used in ancient pagan rituals, casting spells and magic, right? And that's where Hollywood comes from, is magic, right? And the movie magic. And you know, how many of us grew up with, you know, the like Lion King and Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast and these like remarkable, very enchanting stories, even if they did have, you know, like Lion King sex, like subliminally in the sky and everything like that. Like they did have that. And at the same time, the stories really captivated us as children, and they helped shape our consciousness and imbue us with these ideas of nobility and honor and honesty and courage. And you know, we have the series called Hidden Spirituality, where we explore the hidden mystical spiritual significance of these kinds of movies. And of course, at the same time, like, you know, a lot of even actors have come forward and said, like, there's a problem with pedophilia in Hollywood. There's a problem with these kinds of things in Hollywood. You know, it's not so clean as everyone likes, as it's portrayed. And so I feel like we have to be able to take the magic of entertainment and how it can be used to inspire and uplift and educate and change people's lives in positive ways. We have to take that and not throw the baby out with the bathwater, which is, you know, filled with nasty pedophilia goo and shit. Like, we have to be able to take what's good about these stories, and the technology and the ability to tell these stories in mass and really use them for the elevation of consciousness. And so there's like a sifting, I feel like, that's happening, because things have become mixed in an unhealthy way. It's the same thing with the political spectrum. Like, politics can be a wonderful thing if we as a species knew how to use them, how to use the tools of society, of running society in an open, honest, authentic, truthful, loving, for the good of all kind of way. But, you know, power grows in secret. And so all of these things are happening like behind the scenes that nobody ever hears about. That's where, right. That's where we get into the challenges that we have today.
But it's the shadow and the shine. Like all of it is like, it's all of it together. And like us right now, as we're looking at more of the shadow layers, and specifically in the entertainment. And I agree with you on how important it is to have, you know, entertainment and high vibration, things like that, to really help people dive deeper into these specific types of concepts or evolve their own consciousness. In my company, I talk about very often, which I help people write high vibration fiction books. We talk about a lot about the impact, like once you read a book, your reality is changed forever. So how can we consciously choose to change reality in a way that's really positive for the reader or really impactful? Because no matter what, you've read a book and your reality has changed. Even if you hated it, you still changed your reality. So let's leverage it with energy and actually change it. And that's the same thing with any entertainment industry, and definitely with politics too. I think politics is a little bit even more sticky because it's less shiny and pretty for us, and there's enough,
and it runs our lives.
And there's so much divisiveness that's just inherent in the way that it's been structured for so long that there's so much more to break down, as opposed to, hey, we can start releasing our own media, you know, stuff, our own entertainment stuff, our own books that we write and create. And there's other ways for us to go around that hurdle to start raising the consciousness and making that impact.
I agree. I mean, I think maybe that's part of the thinking about where we are right now with our technology, and like technology being that, or social media being that double-edged sword as well, where we have this like susceptibility to envy and susceptibility towards anxiety if like trying to reach a certain, or like trying to compare yourself to other people. But then we also have the ability to like, everyone can be like, everyone has their own personal medicine, their own personal magic, and we're able to share that. And that's crazy, kind of. Like, I don't know
like their little waiting message to enter this spectacular portal of,
by the way, our egg is perfect.
Your waiting egg to break into a new reality when we talk to you via across the country over a little computer screen. It's pretty much.
Oh, you're talking about like the waiting room?
Yeah, it was cute. It was so cute.
It's funny because I mean, as far as the podcast goes, like nobody's gonna get what you're talking about suddenly. Even I was like, wait a second, egg? Like, oh, wait, the egg.
No, I was like, we didn't give background, but still, I'm gonna call out
the
like,
metaphorical egg.
The
royal egg.
We incubated before coming on here is what we're trying to tell you.
Oh my God.
Well, this is so for people who are listening in now to the podcast. We have we're recording this in Zoom, and we have a waiting room on the thing, and it's sort of, I wrote something it's honestly for our mystery school, because we do a lot of workshops with Spirit Mysteries. So people come in and they're all in the waiting room for 5-10 minutes. And it's just like, it's like, brace yourself. You're in an egg incubating to come into a new reality, and all of this like metaphysical, fun stuff. So I'm glad that it was received well by you guys.
It was fantastic.
It was adorable.
We were like, oh, we're sitting in an egg.
I didn't even notice. Just kidding. No, that's really wonderful. That's really, you did well to set some energetic, sacred space. I know that we're into it. I don't know. We're happy.
We're into it.
We like eggs.
Hey, no, that's great. Oh, you know what? I should change it though. I should change it to say that you're in a dragon egg. That would make it even more exciting.
Yeah, it would.
I call my car the
dragon. The visual with that changes completely.
Yeah, it's a whole new.
It's a lot roomier.
It's roomier. Yeah, it's nice.
Has like texture. It has like spackling on the walls.
Oh, it's shiny.
Oh my God, you guys. All right, next topic.
Next topic. Well, hold on. What
do we? Metaphorical egg. I mean, we could go into that.
Well, I mean, we have a giant list you guys have provided about like things we can talk about. I mean, we could just kind of go down the list. It's interesting.
It's your show.
It's my,
what do you find interesting?
I like all of the subjects that we talk about. And I like that it's really funny that we bring in the humor, and you guys specifically bringing the humor to whether it's positive subjects or dark, negative, creepy conspiracy subjects, is being able to laugh, I think, at like sort of the big cosmic joke of it all. As serious as it can be over here, we have to be able to interface on the other side and like be like, this whole thing, like even the subject of like, this giant Illuminati control thing, it's like all of reality is a hologram.
Right. In addition, what about the philosophy? Like we were literally talking about this right before we came in, like talking about like some people's tendencies towards existentialism and like the idea that, okay, so none of this matters. None of this is anything. But if that's also the case, then there's absurdist philosophy where it's like, well, if none of this matters, then we may as well do whatever the hell we want, you know? And I think that
do what drives us and feels good
and anything. And also like whenever I've talked to other people about this idea of like Illuminati or this big kind of conspiracy of people running us, that kind of gives people a lot of credit, thinking that these people are real busy, and I think that it might just be a lot of fucking bad people, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, this conversation is going in a wonderful, very deep direction. So I'm just gonna like have a little bit of this thing. Because I'm trying to, we're Spirit Science Live is very emulated a little bit on the Joe Rogan podcast. So
oh my God,
he's not afraid to have a little bit of cannabis on the thing. So here's this thing that now I'm wondering is, first you described like, if it's all hologram, we can kind of do whatever we want. And it's interesting because even the Hermetica, the Kabbalion describes that for those inside the matrix, for those inside the hologram, the illusion, it feels very real. And you can kind of take, you can, from a soul perspective, you can kind of go out and go, whoa, this is all just an illusion. This is all just whatever it is. But when you're in it, there's systems that you also have to follow. Like even for us to have this call, right, requires this certain technology, this certain software, I need this microphone and a camera that's over there.
Social constructs.
Right. All of these, like we have to play by certain rules in order to engage in the games that we want to play, and that applies to like if you're playing World of Warcraft, like literally you have to, play by the rules of the games that have been established. So likewise with society and then reality. First, in order to engage in reality, you have to have a body and in the physical dimension, and you have to be able to eat, and you have to be able to like survive and all of this kind of thing. But then in order to play in society, if you want to have resources, you have to play by the rules of the economy. Like there's nothing stopping you from running off in the middle of the wilderness, making a little, eating roots and berries and nuts and trying to find your way and find a cave somewhere that you can live in. Like there's nothing stopping you. What'd you say? Sorry?
Our bus got taken away.
I said into the wild style.
Yeah. But obviously, it's like for us and for probably most of the people watching this, because everyone who's watching this likely has a phone or a computer of some kind and access to the internet, is like we are playing by certain rules that are necessary. So I think then the question just becomes, what rules can we break in society and what rules are good to follow? Because I think it's probably fair to say that at least without flying vehicles, with the technology that we currently have, it's not the wisest thing to run every red light and stop sign just because you want to, because it generally keeps people safe by observing the rules of the road, right? Like, so it's kind of like that with society. There's some things that you can be like, that's a stupid rule, I don't want to do that. And other things that are like, well, okay, maybe that's a good idea. And it's like the journey of humankind for thousands of years seems to be this progressive journey of, on one hand, how can we make things more efficient, better for people, safer, but also encourage freedom? And then on the other side, there's this, mysterious agenda like you described, or maybe just a lot of different bad people who are fighting for power and control. And this is my sort of second thought, even just on the subject of politics, which was, and let me know what you think about this, is like, there's this classic saying that says that the best people, the people who are best suited for positions of power and authority are those who don't want it. Those who are not pining for this power, but those who, upon being, that being thrust upon them, they will use it very responsibly because they understand this, that it's not about them. And the political spectrum seems like one of the biggest challenges here, because everybody who's in that realm, for the most part, just want it because they want to be powerful. And that's where we get into problems. It's like they just want to have this big flex instead of actually doing something for people, although they will tell everybody that it's for the people.
And that's gaslighting too.
But yeah, that's how you get to the power. I mean,
you got it.
You know, it's funny you brought up the road rules and how like we can choose not to follow them. It's just probably not the best idea. When I was like, I think maybe 11 or 12, that was one of the first times that I realized that we had individual power. Is I was like riding in the car and I was like, we don't have to follow the lines on this road. There's nothing keeping us on the road. We could drive over there if we wanted to. Like I didn't even you don't even think about it until it like dawns on you how much sovereignty we have. And I feel like we're all kind of permanently stuck in that moment of, hey, every day we have to remember that we have more sovereignty than we think we do, because we are playing inside this video game, and there is game mechanics we got to follow.
I really like that we're bringing this up, because I think that specifically road structure, like I guess I don't know. I've talked about this a lot in my life, because I thought upon realizing the idea of stoplights and stop signs, like I think it's absolutely incredible that we have this system that's been developed and that like everyone has to follow it. But I think the intricacy, kind of like even fiat currency, like these systems that are created, like they're brilliant freaking systems. And I just think they're so interesting, but specifically stoplights. I'm glad that we're talking about this.
Please stop at stoplights.
But here's the part where things get a little bit even more crazy is roads. You have your car, but where can you actually take it? Only where the roads allow you to. Right? You can only follow. So it's like, yes, there's nothing stopping you from keeping you on the road. There is kind of for keeping you in the lines on the road, but there is kind of something stopping you from going too far off the road. Like there are dirt trails and you can drive into nature, but you also run the risk of like getting really stuck in a ditch or a dip or a tall, super tall grass, or stuck in snow, right? Like there's these, depending on where you are in the world, there are these specific like road pathways, and it's like, that's where you can go, right? It's if everyone had flying vehicles, specifically not like the takeoff and landing where you actually need a landing strip, but if you could just go vertical, fly around, and then come straight down, kind of like your own little personal helicopter, imagine where else that you could go. Like there would be no limitations in terms of where you could fly, but the current system still is like, it keeps you in a narrow track. And again, very valuable. People have made roads that go everywhere, but at the same time, there are still places that you can't or shouldn't go to, according to, it's difficult. Like if I wanted to like drive around in the mountains or something like that, there's still paths that I can't just go and drive up the side of a mountain unless I have a very powerful Jeep, I suppose. I don't know.
Right.
But you
Probably
get the idea.
Not even then.
Probably not.
Depending. My Subaru and I we've practiced, but even that's scary.
Some sketch in there.
Crystal mining's hard.
I do think that is kind of, that's another double-edged sword though that we get into, because there's places I don't want roads, there's places in nature that you don't want the cars to go and the people to go either, because they are those sacred spaces where you can walk in there and hike in there on foot and like earn, for lack of a better term, the views or the spirit or whatever, actually get connected with nature again. And maybe there is the benefit of only having roads in specific places versus roads in other places too.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I mean, what's that saying that out of necessity, man needs places where the environment has not been shaped by other men, that it needs places that have not been touched by mankind, that it needs it's kind of like that chaos, that like sacred chaos. And I like that point. It was a great point. I guess and then you think about, okay, so who's deciding where these roads go? And then there's like, oh, the man's deciding.
I mean, and it's also out of necessity in a lot of ways. Fucking man. And I think it's also out of necessity in a lot of ways. Heart. Like originally they're usually built in towns which were built near water, which where that was that, and then they connected the towns so that people could go from town to town.
People were dying.
But the specifics, the specifics were done by the man. But
we live near the Donner Party area, so I mean, remember when there weren't roads and Donner Party happened? That's scary.
I have no idea what that is.
You know what the Donner Party is? You know what?
I'm Canadian.
Oh,
You're
you're
Canadian.
fire. Yeah, my,
Okay. Well,
my
there's a
bad.
bunch of people in the early days trying to get to California for the first
Pioneers.
time, and they were idiots. That's the bottom line of the story.
They didn't know.
No, they decided to travel during winter.
But they
for,
didn't know the
no
Sierra Nevadas.
discernible reason, and they went over the Sierra Nevadas, and they ended up getting stuck. One guy, this is a legit, actual documented story. He had snow blindness, and so he sat down and gave up on life and died. He was like, I can't see, it's too bright, and sat down and died.
If he had a cell phone, then maybe. If it were a freaking road, then maybe this wouldn't have happened.
Right.
They ate each other.
Yeah, they ended up eating each other at the
Donner
top
Party.
because they had no food, because they traveled in winter, which is not what you do with wagons.
It's like
and,
Napoleon.
Like, I think less than half of them actually made it over the mountains.
Yeah, it's. I mean, Napoleon and the Nazis trying to get to like Eastern Europe as well for some sort of blitzkrieg. Like they like tried to go in winter too during like Serbia or Siberia.
Winter. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So
some places, but I don't think they knew.
But yeah, but and they're like, we live in Lake Tahoe, so there's granite. It's just granite out of nowhere. You just have
pine trees,
like huge slabs of it. And and pine trees and all sorts of stuff. So like they had to take forever, and there was no roads, which is what we looped back to, of like, you're just pushing wagons through trees. Like there's no way to even connect meadows. Like I genuinely don't know what they thought they were going to do.
They needed, well, think about, I mean, then manifest destiny and think about all these other like pioneers. I think that's the choice that they took, man. Like, and for us to be able to even inhabit Lake Tahoe, the Donner Party had to happen, or maybe not had to, but it did happen. I don't think the
Donner Party had to happen. But maybe
it's a bad example.
They're at the north.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do know what you're
talking about.
Pioneers
that they had to take the opportunity and the chance to do that, so that westward expansion, go team.
It's interesting how we still feel the echoes of that, of like the American exceptionalism, manifest destiny, like that energy is still so around us in our day-to-day, like of like, if you do these things and work really hard, then you can have the thing that, everyone wants this thing, and you have to follow these rules to kind of get it. And we're so exceptional if we do this thing. But if you notice, like, I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I've been paying attention to like, wow, the amount of times we're sold this like exceptionalism story, and that you're not, you didn't do it right if you didn't reach this exact point, and that sort of thing is really impactful and huge.
That too. This lady, I had made a post on my Facebook recently, and this Wendy May, shout out to Wendy, she said, she's like talking about the idea of finding your purpose, and how we've been sold this idea of what your purpose is, and as opposed to just like actually living your life every day, day to day. You know what I mean? And I know that I fall into it too. I guess maybe that's just kind of the idea of wanting to feel like you're on the right path, and wanting to feel like your life means something, or that you're doing something with purpose, But in reality, we have to try and remember that every day, every moment is our purpose, kind of regardless of whether or not we're successful. And that's hard, man.
Yeah, totally. Interesting. We took that in a direction.
No, it's interesting. It's all swirling around. I mean, you have the unique claim, although maybe if we go back in time enough, everybody can claim this, but you're like, our direct descendants were cannibals, or our direct settlers in this area. That's very interesting. And just
she's like, my family came here from San Diego. Famous psychic grandma and grandpa. Ocean Beach.
But no, I mean, it's like the human history is so interesting to really get into like the depth of the what we've done to ourselves, to each other, to the world, to society. And if we think that what's happening today is new by any stretch, it's just like it seems more like we're just living this cycle of history repeating itself, but on like bigger and bigger scales, because and if only for the reason that we're just more in tune with the rest of the world because of the internet. Like you can find out what's going on in Japan right now, or in China, or in India, and you back 1,000 years ago, or even less, 100 years ago, you wouldn't really know what's going on over there unless you went there, and then you'd be disconnected from what's going on over here. So being able to like just look at the bigger picture and see this mess of human consciousness growing and pushing into these new avenues of technology and levels of consciousness, it just kind of makes you ask, like, I mean, what is the end result for all of this? Where are we going, and what are we choosing to create? And I think, on that whole subject of, like the Hollywood and these ideas that are implanted in society, it's like people generally in mass just kind of get what they're given, like people didn't know that they wanted an iPhone before there was an iPhone, and now everybody wants an iPhone, you know, or has one. Not wants, but you get the idea, like smartphone, there's technology and everything like that. And
you want to be FOMO.
right. And it just becomes this, like, you know, something new comes out, or a big something captivates everyone's attention and mind, and it just steers everybody in that direction. So I guess it's just about, like each of us choosing to put out at, you know, greater and greater levels, whatever vibration it is that we're creating, to be able to kind of going back to that subject at the beginning, like make room for other people to follow in our footsteps, you know?
Yeah. And I think I've thought about this kind of topic going back to the idea of how interconnected our species is right now, and being like, man, is this how it's supposed to be? Because I think, like, look at famous people, like having to be like people that are raised with millions and millions and millions of people looking at them and scrutinizing every detail of their life. And it's like, are humans supposed to go through that? I mean, supposed to, you know, is kind of a maybe an optional word, but it's hard on us. I mean, and we're going to develop past that, though. I truly believe, like with us, where we're evolving right now, is that we're having to evolve to accommodate the fact that everyone's watching us, you know. And then what does that look like too? Right. It looks like a lot of nuance, I think.
Well, and maybe coming to terms with this idea. I mean, I don't know this is true, other than I read it in the Flower of Life book and in other channelings and stuff. But it's that humankind is so interesting to the entire universe that there are like countless species in the cosmos. They're all of like the multidimensionality of the universe watching us, because they're like, this is a very weird, interesting species to watch. So it's like almost like we're in like a planet-wide Truman Show, where all of these different, you know, like a bajillion different alien species are all like watching us, but like can't get involved. And every so often, you know, a UFO crashes because they're watching us too closely. Like some teenage aliens got, you know, too excited about checking out the humans or something like that.
Got wasted and drove to Earth.
Yeah.
We're here. Well, I mean, doesn't that play with exceptionalism as well? I mean, it's kind of hard to say that's.
I don't think how we're great necessarily.
Well, how can we even prove that's happening?
Oh no, exactly. It's all just speculation at this point. And
part of what makes us
or channeling. I mean, look, because like you know, you take some DMT or some ayahuasca or something like that. The next thing you know, exactly. You appear in this other dimension. I love. There's one story from DMT, the spirit molecule, where one of the participants in the study was given DMT, and he said he appeared in this like Amazon rainforest, and there's this big, tall, strong Amazonian woman. And she's like, "You dare to come here?" And he's like, I guess, you know, and then the next thing you know, he kind of like fizzles back out of the experience and comes back to his reality. And it's just like, did he just like warp to some other dimension where there's like Amazonian, you know, she's just like, what are you doing here? You know,
and maybe she's like bathing, or like she's like breastfeeding her Amazonian baby, you know. She's like, excuse me.
I mean, I think I mean, with the work I've done with astral projection and things along those lines, I mean, as we talked about a little bit when you were on our show, like it feels so real when you're experiencing it, that becomes part of your truth because it was so real. And there is some level of like, well, I can accept what I've seen, and maybe it's something different on like nuanced level of maybe it's a projection of my soul, or maybe it is tuning into something external. But all of those experiences, especially when you're awake to channeling and astral projection, those things really do shape your reality in really deep and impactful ways. And that's part of us all discovering our own truth. And enough people have channeled the same thing at the same time, or, you know, seen the same sort of things where it's like, whoa, this is definitely part of our conscious field, if anything.
Yeah, and that brings up so many ideas of collective unconsciousness, interconnectedness, or whether or not it is something outside of ourselves. But then again, what is even outside of ourselves? Yeah. Like this is some shit that we're getting into, that like I do believe that we are leading the way, like not in an exceptionalist way, but thinking like we're asking these questions because we're at the point in time where we have to start asking these questions.
Yeah. Well, and we're safe enough to ask them for part of like for one of the in a really long time. This is the first time in a really long time that humans are safe enough to explore these concepts. Like our survival needs, our base level human stuff is taken care of.
And maybe that's what's creating, really cool. That's creating a lot of friction too, though, is because we, like, I think that a lot of the reason we struggle with fulfillment is because we have jobs as opposed to like having a relationship with our own food and having stronger connections with our family, you know, like our sense of fulfillment is being forced to change if we even develop it at all, depending on each person, each circumstance. But I think that, man, yeah, it's hard to tell.
This is just side anecdote with that. When I was an HR manager, which I did for a while, you had to market jobs to millennials in a very different way than you would market to anyone else, because you had to show them that it served their sense of purpose, or else they didn't respond. And it was fascinating. And
Indigo
I worked at
children.
a ski resort, so I'm like, you're
stoners, come on.
Right? But still, like, that was really what it is if you highlighted, like, hey, this is really going to be fulfilling for you, this is going to be a fulfilling life experience. That's what drew kind of our generation in to the hiring pool, as opposed to, hey, you can make this much an hour and get a free pass. That was not nearly as impactful as, look at this crazy, cool, emotionally fulfilling adventure you're going to go on, and you're going to make this much an hour and get a free pass.
Master's degree for 14 an hour, you know?
Yeah, but it was just really interesting. Our consciousness has kind of gone that way, and our generation specifically is like, we want more fulfilling things, even if it does mean you're making $14 an hour. But
post-apocalyptic fiction, dude. We want to, I mean, I'm serious. We feel like we have to have a mission, or we feel like we have to, and that's the indigo children thing too, is that like we're like eroding and tearing down all these structures that no longer serve us, and we're replacing it, but that replacement it's a trip.
You know, it's weird, again, being in the publishing industry and working with people in their fiction books, the market for post-apocalyptic fiction is so hard to sell. Like right now, you can't sell a book.
It's been done, kind of. I've thought about it, and I was like, that's been done. We gotta do something else.
Yeah, there's so many other things, but like people are like, no, don't sell us that. Or vampires, hard no.
Yeah, interesting.
Wow.
And then it's like, all right, having the idea of thinking forward, like how, and then that's where visionaries come from. Like, all right, so what do we think is going to be interesting, or what do we think we should, what do you think is coming, you know?
Well, oh my gosh, this is so interesting, because it's just on the subject of like, weaving a few different ideas together here. First, the marketing aspect, like marketing towards someone with a purpose and everything like this. It's a very interesting line to go between, you know, it's like you're kind of manufacturing a purpose for people, right? They weren't actively thinking of it beforehand. You put together some marketing that does it, but there's also value in that, because the people who wanted to have a purpose but didn't before then were not facilitating or demonstrating the imaginative qualities of their minds to be able to come up with what it was that they wanted to do in the first place, right? So they're kind of floating around in the void saying, I want a purpose, I want a purpose. Someone with marketing goes, here's a purpose for you. And you know, kind of funneling them into a direction. And I think if the person who was floating around in the void of their lives wasn't facilitating or exercising their imagination anyways, then that's probably a good thing, as long as the thing that they're doing is the energy is right. It's fulfilling in some way, right?
Integrity.
And because I get that, because I had to learn marketing, and I'm still a student of life in all of these different ways, but marketing became something like I pushed away on it for so long, and then I recently, you know, learned and just had to change my relationship with resources and business and all of this, because I was like, I have these big dreams of creating, you know, pyramid centers and giant studios and making movies and spirit science movies on a big scale. I have to learn, I have to embrace this consciousness, but I have to transmute it through my heart first. And so it's been this process. And kind of just speaking to, even going back a little bit further of what you guys were talking about, of like humans going in like all these different directions. It reminded me of the like in, I think it's this one's the Hermetica. Yeah, before it's the Kabbalion. This one's the Hermetica. There's this dialogue that explains that humanity is going to go in almost in literally every direction. I'm going to be paraphrasing this a bit here, but it basically says like the God created the, you know, humanity and all of the lesser gods, you know, and it's kind of describing like the planets or the forces of the planet sort of were kind of complaining. They were like, what are you doing, God, creating these people? They're going to dissect things. They're going to explore every inch of the ocean. They're going to, you know, destroy stuff. They're going to rip each other apart. They're going to do all of this crazy things. And God's like, no, it's a part of this master plan, a part of them learning. And the idea was that like that we as a species have to like explore every avenue of good and evil thoroughly every possible, that's why there's so many people, because every person's having their own unique subjective experience to like explore these different avenues of life in order to find out what works and what doesn't work. And in order for us to, like, you know, we're ripping apart, dissecting the human body, looking for the soul. The only way that we'll eventually actually find it is by exploring everything else first, and then realizing that we have to go within. And maybe this is the point that we're at right now, like that, you know, that this is the natural progression where, you know, 50, 100 years ago, getting paid a certain amount of wage was good enough. That's all people were worried about. Now people want a purpose. And as we continue to evolve, there's a stepping into a higher and higher fulfillment that comes about with living and wanting to do something that's meaningful. And as that generation grows up and essentially overtakes the older generation who have all the resources and power and authority in the world right now, it's like this big question of how come every president of the United States has to be like this 80-year-old man?
Right.
And eventually, you know, as the older generations fade out and are recycled with their souls, come back anew, then the younger generations come up and things do change. It just takes a while because the older generation is still hanging on really tightly. And it's just a process that we're going through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you can only really blame them so far. I think that I find that I defend humans a lot and say, like, we can be so critical. And I mean, I'm critical as well. I think I'm more so critical of myself than anything. But I think that we're born with needs. We're born with fears. We're born with a desire and a necessity for love. If we don't get that, then shit gets real weird. And it gets real hard.
Real weird.
And we can only and it's painful. And we experience a lot of pain as humans. And I think that a lot of the time they say that there's a stronger correlation between childhood neglect and trauma and drug abuse and drug addiction later on in life than there is between food and diabetes. And I think that can be played out on a massive role of, we don't know what we're doing. We're trying. Some people are trying better. Some people are trying harder. And then some of us are trying to like push forward to try and see, okay, what else is there? What else is there? Yeah.
It's a really interesting point about the drug addiction and stuff, and talking about like the older generations are hanging on to this way that they were. And I think that's another big theme with sort of the younger generations right now is healing from trauma and different ways that we can energetically help heal through these things that we experienced and understand deeper on that what level too, and healing. And there's more emphasis put kind of in that space.
Yeah.
You know, not overall, but like I would say more now than there ever really has been. And so the older generations are still holding on to like, no, but this is how it worked then, and so we're going to have it work now again, and it's just a very different experience. And
because we're having a different experience, maybe that's something good about having so much access to every other person on the planet, is that, you know, there's that double-edged sword of comparing yourself in one way and comparing yourself in another, and recognizing, okay, where do I resonate? What do I see outside of myself that I resonate with as well? And, you know, we're being forced to kind of open our minds drastically, and so that we figure out like what works, what doesn't work. And then also there's individualism versus collectivism, and that's a lot. Like our generation's doing a lot, man. We're being forced to like overhaul all this stuff, and maybe that's why we're so feisty. I don't know. I think we're supposed to.
Maybe that's why we're so feisty. I feel like it also, being connected in all of this ways, like some ways it's so helpful to not feel alone, because everyone's so connected. Like it's crazy to be like, I have clients in Norway, like I have like friends that are there that I've never met personally, but they exist there, you know, like so you feel so much more connected. And that being said, it can also be so isolating because the lack of like actual physical human being, like even pre-COVID
coronavirus, man.
Right. But even pre all of that, like just the, you know, like the lack of physical stuff is happening too. And then the elements of like that plays out on a grander scale, thinking about like fractalating it up. You know, humanity as a species feels very alone.
Yeah, we do.
Unless you're tuning in and channeling all these other things, then you don't feel as alone. But it's like the same sort of concept is like, oh, as a species, that really hit me at the beginning of COVID. I was there's no one in the galaxy that we can like call to come help or anything, you know. It's just very interesting.
I think I have a like one of my conspiracy theories about coronavirus was that I was like, all right, so thinking about how far our electromagnetic field from our heart reaches, it reaches 6 feet on all sides of ourselves. You know what I mean? So 12 feet altogether. And I was like, I think that's what they're doing. But then you got to give people a lot of credit to have gone that far to be like, no, their heart energies can't even touch, you know? I know.
My heart energy is touching you.
That's my conspiracy theory. I know we're like
very interesting. I never thought of that before. Well, and because I mean, is that what the Heart Math Institute? Because they're the ones who did the measurements. Is it actually 6 feet?
Then I believe so. I thought it was 12 feet, like all together, and you're in the middle of the 12 feet.
So 6 feet.
Wow. Because I also remember, I remember Drumvalo explaining the light body, the size of the Merkabah field when it's activated, it's actually like 50 feet in diameter.
Oh my God, that's terrifying.
But
yours,
most people,
it's a lot to have to figure out and navigate. I think
most people do not have their Merkabah active. So, but the heart field is active. Although I think also that size is a variable based on how much work they're doing and doing the breathing. But I gotta say, as far as conspiracy theories goes, that one's pretty good. Not gonna lie.
It's pretty solid, right?
I've never even read it. I made it up.
That's great. And I mean, like, okay, so the conspiracy, this is very interesting. I mean, we're talking about a lot of different agendas and everything like this. Like my team and I right now, we're currently making the conspiracy theory of everything. I don't know if you've heard anything about it or if you've seen, we actually just launched a platform called Spirit Conspiracies yesterday. And it's like free to access inside of Spirit Mysteries. And it's like all this conspiracy content that's being banned everywhere, along with the conspiracy theory of everything and a couple episodes. So we're talking about the pandemic, and we're talking about, an elusive movie called Plandemic. You might have heard of it, right? Yeah. And specifically, I think it's very interesting. There's just this conversation that we're having as a team of like the redirection of the narrative from society and wondering like, is this conspiracy or does everyone just really feel this way? But if you look up Plandemic anywhere outside of like their website, it is just crucified by everyone. Like it is, it's like you go on the news. I mean, it's literally people on the news talking about it's the most dangerous movie. It's terrible. You don't watch it, all this stuff. And you go on YouTube and you look it up and like the top 50 videos are like doctor response to this movie. And every single post is like, this is ridiculous. It's so stupid. How could we be so insane to believe in something like this? And at the same time, very large percentage of the human population believes that the pandemic was planned in some capacity, right? Yeah. Was purposefully done. And there's like this very big divide. And it seems as though it's almost as if like we're actively choosing what paradigm we want to live in. You can live in the paradigm where you're questioning the narratives and looking at all these different stories, or you could live seemingly in a much more comfortable mindset, although perhaps, I don't know, where it's just like, no, it's just they're working on a vaccine, everything's fine, we're gonna get through this, and there's that.
All the vaccine stuff, like, all right, like I don't think I would take a coronavirus vaccine, but I do believe in vaccines for children. And it's like, how do we, I think that's part of the reason that the media is doing what it's doing is because I think that they're trying to overwhelm us with so much information that we don't know which way is up or down and that we just let them make their decisions.
Well, this is one of those things I think you'll have to really dive into yourself and I'll just, for everyone listening to, but again, speaking to that, there was this video I was referring to, this live stream on YouTube from a woman who's a doctor, and she was talking about vaccines for the COVID. She also talked about just vaccines in general, and she was saying that like infants and pregnant women and children are being like the average vaccine that people are getting has like so much more. I think it was like I don't know if it was calcium or if there was some element that was in it that was aluminum. That was the one. So much more aluminum in it than what it was like 12 times more than what any child or person or human needs at all. And that it's like going into our system at a very young age and like changing our vibration from sometimes pre-birth. And I think that it's just one of those things like everyone, we really need to do our own research on this and really go down the rabbit hole and see what both sides are saying. You know, see what the doctors are saying, see what other doctors are saying too, because it's one of those things where I just don't know. I think humankind has an issue with trust, and I think rightly so, because there's so many people who say things and do things because, you know, for one reason, but, you know, they say that they're doing it for one reason and then they're really doing it for another. And I think there's a lack of transparency between us all, and something has to break. We have to learn how to be truthful as a species, but until like everything's out in the open, I don't know that we're going to get there.
Hopefully. I guess 2 points of that. On the vaccine thing, we talked a little bit about this with Ben Stewart when he was on our show, and he talked about how like we have evolved to deal with things if we eat something wrong or if we inhale something that's not good. Like we've evolved, but we've never before had something enter into our bloodstream, and we haven't yet caught up evolution wise to like deal with the things entering into our bloodstream. So like there's an element of that too to think about, as well as like, whoa, we actually are behind in evolution. This is less than 100 years of doing this. Like,
oh my gosh.
So to think about it just on our body's capacity. And then to speak a little bit on the trust piece, whenever I think about how humanity deals with trust, the way that I've tuned into the energy of trust, it looks the same as the energy of money. And so any evidence that you need energetically to see the lack of trust, just take a look at the way that humans handle money. We handle our trust very, very similarly, because really like money is the trust that we can physically use in this reality. And I think that that is a perfect evidence of like, yeah, we have issues with this trust as a species overall, and it's evident in a physical form.
Man. And then that's what we're here to do. And then it's actually like living through the details of that.
Yeah.
And actually like this is something we've talked about with the paradigm shift, is saying, you know, there's a difference between doing research and like understanding on paper all the concepts that are happening. And then there's another thing when you're experiencing it and when you're having to actually navigate it on a personal level, and how difficult it can be to see. And I guess maybe that's where our hearts come in, is that's where we follow, is that heart center.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I almost wonder then, like, this is reminding me of this conversation really about prophecy. And there's a book I just finished recently, which is Rick Strassman's second book after DMT, the Spirit Molecule, which is DMT and the Soul of Prophecy, where he relates the DMT experience and all of the revelations that, you know, his volunteers had in those experiments and those trials, compared to prophecy in the Bible, and then looking at where we are as a species today, and seeing how these prophecies all line up, and what value can you get from the DMT, from the psychedelic experience. Like, is there a relationship between a DMT or a psychedelic experience and that sort of prophetic state and the ancient biblical prophetic state? And there's a lot of places where they overlap. Sure. But then at the same time, we look at where we are, again, like as a species here and now today, and the prophecies of the, you know, Revelation, and this, you know, even just the book of Revelations, and this breaking of all the seals, and all of the, you know, the crazy, the 4 horsemen, you know, pestilence and famine and war and disease or whatever, all these things coming and sweeping across the nation and everything like this. It seems as though, you know, on the New Age side, we often talk about this like idea of a consciousness shift, and we're evolving our consciousness, and there is, you know, we're experiencing a bit of this, but as you just described too, there's like this lag time with our evolution, where the majority of the species are still just, you know, they're really content with their sports and their jobs, and, you know, they're not really looking for something greater or something bigger. Yeah. And so
it's really easy to be enlightened around enlightened people. So it definitely, we sometimes get stuck in that bubble.
Speaking to the choir, I'll be right back. You guys keep talking.
Okay.
And so I guess the question then is like, you know, I think there's going to be this consciousness shift regardless, but it, as even many of the prophecies say, is like there seems to be this, like, from here where we are now to this enlightened state, there's like a lot of intensity in between there. There's a spoken word song thing, meditation called Metamorphosis, which is beautiful. We actually have shared it on our YouTube channel, and it says that the process of birthing is often fraught with intensity, and speaking to how this is like this arduous journey through the chaos, through the darkness, through this revelation of truth that is so jarring, that is so intense for people that it completely, upends society and turns everything upside down on its head. And it's almost like you kind of start to wonder if, there's all these, conspiracies about like NASA hiding the truth about aliens that we've connected with and stuff. And it's like, there's stories that from people who are leaking it that were like, yeah, they thought it was too intense for people to know about, right? They thought it was when like all of the world's religions would break down, all of our understanding of reality would break down, our understanding of ourselves and our place in the universe would entirely dissolve the moment that these aliens came forward and started explaining shit to us. So I guess it's my question then is, I mean, do you think first do you agree? Do you think that that's kind of this necessary trial and tribulation? And I mean, what do you think people would, how would people react if that actually came out, in mass? Like, would all of society dismember itself? And maybe that's why it's being held back for now.
Held captive.
I don't think that's giving people enough credit. I think that's limiting as hell for like our capability as human beings to understand these big, deep concepts. It would be chaotic for a minute, but chaos isn't necessarily bad. And we have this inherent belief that it is, and chaos is us trying to understand things, and then we work through it to get to that other side of it. And I think it's limiting our potential and our growth as a human species to be like, no, they're not ready, it'll break us all down. Like, I think that humans have a big, deeper understanding than that.
It's like an excuse. And I think that goes back to what I was saying about Hollywood, about them introducing these ideas into our mainstream consciousness. And I think people would be like, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, all right. I mean, it's kind of scary, like to actually, like if you were to interact with like a physical extraterrestrial or something, even for me, that'd be pretty intimidating. But then there's, that's kind of what creates this like upward spiral.
And half the people probably wouldn't even believe it, even if they were like, here's the alien, the aliens on television, the aliens.
It's Donald Trump.
But people would be like, no, I still don't believe that. That doesn't fit in my narrative. And they would just block it out. So it would really just be open to the people who are willing to accept an additional narrative besides their own.
Whoa.
That's interesting. I think the part of the conversation that comes along with this area, though, is also like the introduction of alien technologies or just super technologies that we don't, couldn't even fathom, like the limitless free energy device. And this question of like, okay, well, but if everyone had an arc reactor, even my thinking right now is, I don't know that we can handle that. Like so many people would use it for good, no question. But like you've seen any Iron Man movie where the Iron Man 2, Iron Man 1, villain gets the super tech. If anybody can have it, there's people with malicious intention in the planet. They will use it to cause destruction. Yeah. And I think that's also a part of this concern of like, when things step up to the next level, like we have to be able to learn how to use things responsibly. And I don't know that, I think that there's still a lot of selfishness that we have to overcome. So maybe we have to overcome it through this really intense period, of
2020.
It's just a matter of how that's going to come about,
Yeah.
Because it might be like that kind of technology is the reward on the other side. Maybe we have to have this upending craziness, learn these really intense lessons, society gets upended anyways, and then we can actually step into this higher reality. But I'm not exactly sure. There's a lot of ways that it could play out. It's just a matter of like being present to it now at this point, I think, just watching it. Like how interesting. It's like here's the world and the revelations of everything that's happening, and then I feel like I'm like that Michael Jackson meme where he's eating popcorn. He's just like
right, like or like the aliens, and they're like, dude, shit's getting intense down there. They're like,
what are they gonna do now?
It's season 20 of fucking Earth. and they are mad. It's true. And we're just like a part of it, trying to survive it as best as we can with.
Right. Well, then there's the other element though, too, is of like, well, if we reach that point, if this stuff happened, would there be just a rapid up-leveling of consciousness collectively? Because that's another theory around it too. Like maybe
the monkey theory.
Maybe we don't have to suffer and struggle to get through. Maybe that's a complete illusion that we've created for ourselves, that all of this has to be suffering and struggle in order to reach this next point. We have to go through the chaos thing. Maybe when this happened, we would have a collective up-leveling of consciousness just energetically, because there'd be enough of that high vibration or intense energy on planet in order to cause that. Like that is actually a real possibility. possibility.
No, I agree. I read this book when I was one of the first books that kind of really started me on my spiritual development was this book called Spontaneous Evolution by Dr. Bruce Lipton.
I love him.
Greg Braden. Dude, this book is crazy. It's talking about how evolution does not occur amongst, I mean, like, I'm just going to quote what I had read in the book, whatever, that evolution does not occur over this long amount of time. Very eventually is that something happens and it triggers something and we evolve.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, and that's something that we can look forward to. And they wrote this whole book on that same topic of once a certain percentage of the population reaches a certain critical mass, that things do change and that things, our society will spontaneously awaken.
Yeah.
And I guess we're doing the work.
Well, and humans have a very deep connection to suffering. Like we have attached ourselves to it for so long. Like it's true. It's just
it's our art.
It's what we've gone through. You know,
it's our art.
The best art we've made.
We paint with our suffering.
I actually like that
on the way up
funny.
here. It's like I'm kind of sad. Like I can write poems right now.
It's kind of sad. I can write poems right now. Yeah, you know, like we have this deep level of attachment to it, and maybe we don't need to have that. Maybe that is something that we are leaving behind, and we can process and grow without it.
Interesting.
Now I might be being pessimistic, but I want to. It's like both agree and disagree, but I have a slightly more maybe darker perspective on this.
And
here's why. I've done a lot of personal development work. I've done a lot of plant medicine. I've done a lot of ayahuasca ceremonies, and I've purged a lot of stuff that was in me that I didn't even know was there.
Right.
What you're talking about being the we've been attached to suffering. I think we have to understand that it's not it's not like here's your suffering and here's your hand and you're just like, I'm just attached to it. No. It's like integrated into your biology. It's, the suffering we've been carrying, not just our trauma, but lifetimes and hereditary, passed on from family and generational trauma that's been built up for so long. So this is something we have to, I don't think it's just like letting go. It's just, it's not so simple. You have to really release it. And to release it, you have to go through the process of bringing it up and purging it in some way, not necessarily, through ayahuasca. Maybe it's having really difficult conversations and meditation and breath work or, whatever it is for you specifically. Plant medicine's one fast way, but, by doing the work, by going inside and not just kicking it under the rug. Mm-hmm. And so I think that in order for us to get from where we are, a species that is holding on to so much density and darkness and suffering, for us to collectively let that go is going, whether it's imposed upon us or we do the work ourselves. I think it'll be easier if we do the work because it's more purposeful as opposed to it being forced upon us. But eventually that has to be released. It has to come out. And I think that process is not necessarily easy because I know for myself, I've had my head in the bucket purging at Rhythmia and the ayahuasca ceremonies a lot. And I know it's how uncomfortable it can be to do that work. And if everyone was suddenly like that level of purging was forced upon people, I don't think that it would be just this smooth up leveling. I think that it would be really intense for some people who are forced to make radical and transformative leaps in their lives, or, if they choose to stay where they are, just experience and build up more and more suffering. Because then it's a matter of maybe it's not that we're, it's just us as a species elevating in consciousness. Maybe it's the whole vibration of the planet, and the planet is going up anyways. And in that case, then we have a choice to either ride the wave or, kind of be pulled up from the depths afterwards, or be transmuted. That's another idea that often happens is even I think it's biblical. It's like those souls who do not elevate and transmute and transform their frequency, their energy, will be recycled, will be burned in the fiery inferno of the coming revelation, and that energy will just be recycled into the all. It's kind of like an old forest fire, right? That turns into ash, and the ash becomes the fertility for the next cycle. Yeah. And it seems to me, again, I'm not trying to be bleak or anything, but I think that we have to, for anybody who wants to have a smooth and lighter, less suffering experiences, we have to do the work right now to elevate ourselves so that so that things are, because like the lighter you are means the less suffering you have, the lighter you are.
Right.
Because that's like, you have to, in order to be light, you have to purge yourself of everything that's heavy and dark. Yeah, exactly. It's like if the darkness within you is keeping your heart and your light, shrouded, then you have to like get into the light and shine it so bright that the rest of it kind of melts away. And maybe that's kind of airy fairy, but that seems to be sort of a more metaphysical look, I think, from my perspective of what's required in order to move from where we are to the next level, because we have to, as a species, learn compassion. And sometimes you only learn compassion by going through those really hard times.
Mm-hmm.
Man.
And I do agree with like a lot of that and most of what you said, and doing the work and that level. I think a lot of what I do languaging wise for myself and things along those lines is kind of remove the languaging of doing the work and going through these really challenging things to release the suffering is suffering itself. Is this dense energy of suffering. Doing the work doesn't have to be suffering, and it can be challenging. It can be really, overwhelming. It can be those sort of things, but it doesn't have to be the bleakness that is this I'm suffering feeling, even though you are purging and it's really uncomfortable and it doesn't feel good. And you're looking at these hard truths about yourself and you're like, oh my goodness. But seeing those things isn't necessarily an act of suffering. It is truly more of a healing thing, even if it's gross and it doesn't feel great in the moment and you're going through the shit. Sorry, I don't know if I can cuss on here, but I said it. But
I think I've sworn twice, so you're good.
Okay, good. I was like, oh no.
I know. I tried at first. I was like,
we just cussed so
I
much
heard
now.
him do it.
Okay,
so.
I wanted to make sure though. But like you're going through the shit, and healing the shit as opposed to staying in that. This stuff is still just happening to me. I'm swirling in the suffering, and that is what it really is. And you are releasing lifetimes of your own souls, past lives and your ancestry of these different layers and traumas and suffering that has occurred through this act of healing and the releasing and purging. And it can be uncomfortable. And I'm sure on a grand scale, it would be really, really, really not good. And it would be, not good, but like, it would be a lot of discomfort and a lot of dredging and a lot of, really, just dense energy coming up. But I don't necessarily think that act of healing, that act of releasing is suffering in and of itself.
I think that I can really relate to that in terms of some of the things that I'm at least going on in my personal life, that my answer has become, instead of trying to fight against these things, like to actually truly surrender to it and be like, you know what, like this is happening, and you can continue to make yourself feel bad about it or continue to be frustrated or anything, or you can just handle it. And not even in a cliche way, but like finding our own personal path and our own relationship with
clarity,
giving in to this suffering in a way, and stop trying to keep it from happening. I think that's that's a good point. Attachment, the trying to separate from that attachment of outcome.
Right. And I really appreciated your point of like, it's not like we have suffering over here and we're like holding on to it, be like, I love you. That's not what's happening. It's like integrated into our being. And we are releasing that.
Yeah. Well, and part of that release is the identification that we are not our minds or our bodies, right? But we carry the awareness of those things. And as long as we're rooted in the identity that I am my body and I am what I think in my mind, it that keeps us kind of attached to whatever paradigm that we're currently living out. But as we continue to surrender and break away from those ideas, we just sort of naturally evolve into something else, we naturally begin to work on and let go of the things that we're attached to. And I mean, it can be a beautiful thing. And I really resonate with what you said as well, that it's just how can I phrase it in a different way? Maybe just that I don't know, we're intertwined, and but we don't have to be if we make the conscious decision not to. And that takes every individual identifying and knowing that it's okay to ask questions outside of what the mainstream narrative says.
That's becoming really hard too, though. I think that even like on a political spectrum as well, that there's a lot of things that I feel like if you disagree or if you start questioning a certain narrative that is held by a lot of the people you're close to, that you're not really allowed to open up about that. And whether it's consciously spoken or unspoken, like there's this sort of fear that a lot of people are going through of actually opening up, and fear of being judged for what they believe or fear of what they're questioning.
Right. It's a whole cancel culture thing too online.
Yeah.
Like it's that other spectrum of now we finally can question these ideas. We have the platforms
But
to
if you
do it on an
question it,
individual
then-
level, but then it triggers other people's fears and their insecurities and that sort of thing. And that can come back at you again.
And they assume that one thing equals another thing. If you question this, and that means you're this, and that is on the other side, you know? And it's, I mean, and maybe not, obviously not all the time, but it's something that, Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot. Are you familiar with Jordan Peterson?
Yeah.
Oh my God. You know, I really appreciate him. And even like Ben Shapiro, some of these people and Candace Owens, I mean, I'm really surprised by a lot of the people that are coming to the forefront, and some of the conversations that are being brought up, some of the viewpoints that are being questioned, and I don't know, I'm just coming across a lot of interesting philosophy right now. And we have some really beautiful people on the planet right now that have some big balls to, you know, to say what
question on a grand scale. So all of us can be like,
be like, all right, a lot of people aren't going to like me for this, but this is what I believe to be the truth outside of either direction, you know? It's weird.
Yeah. And even just, I don't know, like, I often like to try and, I mean, I found that, see if this resonates with you, one of the most valuable perspectives to take is not to believe or disbelieve anything, right? Like, because everybody's putting out, I believe this, I believe that, no, this is the truth, no, that's the truth. And I found that it's really helpful to be able to be like, I don't know. What does everyone say, right? Like not being so crude and rude to people who believe or disbelieve any particular thing. Like flat Earth is a very good example, right? Because it's like, if you believe it, there's people who are so adamant about that paradigm, and then people who don't believe it are so adamant about that paradigm. And just to be like, how interesting that this is a conversation to be had, you know?
I agree.
We just put out a video yesterday called The Secrets of Hollow Earth, because it's like, well, it's like the flat Earth gets so much attention. What about the hollow Earth theory? This one's fun, you know? And again, I think maybe there's some confusion. Like, people probably just believe that we believe that, right? And it's like, I don't know. Maybe it's very interesting. It's very compelling. It's a curious idea. Let's talk about it. But I don't want to definitively say like, well, this is the way that it is, because tomorrow I could find out something different, right? And so embracing that, like, everything is constantly changing all of the time, and change is the universal constant. Just like sinking into that frees you from the burden of believing something, right? And then you can try and really go within to find that what is described as knowing, you know? And the Hermetica, bless its heart, I love that book. So I keep referencing it. The Hermetica explains that belief is like a pale reflection of true knowing, akin to how the pale light of the moon, of a full moon, compares to the brilliance of the sun. And like that intense luminous of the sun, like that is like true knowing. And when you believe something, it's just like a pale reflection in contrast. So I find that just like getting rid of your beliefs, don't worry about believing. You just exist and go to try and find what you really genuinely know in your heart and live from that place, right? Like towards the nature of your existence. But all these other things, flat Earth, round Earth, it doesn't really affect us all that much. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter whether you know it or not, you know, like it doesn't relate to the quality of your soul. And so I think that's, I don't know. What do you think? Is that a resonant idea?
I think so. I mean, I really resonate with that, but living in heart consciousness is sometimes really challenging because it takes a level of awareness of people where it's really easy to be like, I believe this, and this is what I believe. And these are the 18 reasons why in childhood I was told this, and therefore I believe it, as opposed to going in and being like, actually sitting in your heart center and understanding what it feels like for you, both physically and energetically, to actually resonate with something and have that knowing. And get to that space. So I think I deeply resonate with everything that you said. And I think that is almost like the goal of enlightenment in a way too, right? Of to be able to have that knowing and understand your own truth, not necessarily truth, but your own
discernment
on that level. Yeah, absolutely.
I think it just keeps reminding me of the idea of like in Buddhism or in some sort of meditation philosophy, they say when you go into meditation that what you are trying to initially do is separate yourself from your thoughts and observe your thoughts. And I think that's an almost identical concept to observe what's happening around you, you know? And then we have different types of people, like in terms of having these philosophies and these like desires to understand concepts, like that is a lot of what drives people too. And so there has to be this like leveling up of where we are to incorporate this desire and this need for knowledge. And it's kind of like this hunger for understanding, and then realizing that we'll never know anyway. And I think that can kind of drive some people crazy unless you
go inside,
separate you separate yourself from it. Yeah, man. And then it's like, it's just, that's a really just deep concept, I think.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I was just thinking about this last night too, actually, because it's again, speaking to this book, I was just finishing the audiobook of DMT and the Soul of Prophecy. He describes that in the Bible, it says that the human mind and the human body is not capable of understanding all of God's work from the beginning of time to the end, right? It's sort of like that, you know, where we have a pinhole of awareness for the vastness of the all. And at the same time, it seems as though, almost have to jump over and quote Dr. Strange here, is like you gain control by surrendering control. When you stop trying to forcibly understand and just surrender to everything that's flowing through you, you actually open the, you know, you increase your broadband limit, or you increase your bandwidth to be able to receive more. And I think that's where sort of these, you know, like experiencing prophecy, experiencing miracles, performing miracles, and that sort of thing, all of that comes from is when you really let go and just let spirit flow through you. You end up having so much more power. And then you know exactly what you need to know in any particular moment. You know what to say. It's not so much that you have to have such a dialed in understanding of reality. Reality has a dialed in understanding of you. And you're just sort of becoming an actor for spirit to live through you. And we have this identity that I am Jordan and I have a body and I live here and all of this stuff. But if we separate ourselves enough from that identity, we find that, oh, we're all spirit, and we're all spirit in a multitude of bodies, experiencing each other subjectively. And to be able to just sort of embrace that, and let go of the need to have this personal identity as much, allows us to have a lot more like play with the divine in our lives.
And in how we impact others too. Because now you're like, okay, well, we're all spirit then in some capacity, experiencing ourselves in some way. Then we can actually have it. You understand your ability to impact so many more people because you have something you can all relate to in that way. I guess on an energetic sense, I think is what I'm really talking about, is you really can open up and, you know, you have more play to be like, okay, like maybe if I do want to write down this idea into a book form or something like that, I can understand that it can relate to the energy that I understand in myself, in other people, or something along those lines as well. Of like, you know, you can put stuff out there where you're like, this is energy that I'm experiencing in my little, you know, pocket of our all shared experience. What are you experiencing in that way, as opposed to being so attached to your personal thing? And if anyone says anything different, they're attacking you personally and like boxing yourselves into that soul. This is the only identity I have.
Or wanting people to agree with you as well. That's I think true. A lot of what we're seeing in some of the metaphysical community as well is people like, we've come to find our own, some sort of level of truth, and we're putting it out there. And there's this like, there's a fine line between authenticity and then like wanting to like be that person that people look at, you know? And I think that that's kind of something that, I mean, and maybe that's me being critical and being like, oh, you know, you can't really disregard people because you don't know any of the stories. You don't know what people are going through, but that level of integrity on being a channel for creator. I'm doing this, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And she's like, all right, so tell yourself that you are a brilliant and genuine and fantastic writer or something like that, or whatever kind of sort of artistic medium you're trying to work through. And then write down what reactions your brain has, like why you're not that. And it says, then you have to write down, I allow for the creative God or something to flow through me. I allow for myself to be a channel for full creation, regardless of whoever I am. Like to open yourself up to being that channel. And then there's the level of integrity
Awareness.
again, you know, like to what extent are you being authentic, and to what extent are you trying to get people to validate you too? And that's something that's a lot of shadow work just for people.
That is a lot of shadow
you know,
work.
some people, we don't realize. I think that a lot of the time we don't know what we don't know. And that's where a lot of people get stuck, you know, and that's where the heart center thing comes from again, maybe.
Yeah.
Or comes to again.
Wow. Full circle.
Yeah. Like we just keep coming back to different things. I love it.
Good talk, guys.
You know,
Good
and
talk.
I know I have to probably let you go here soon. This has been an amazing podcast. In closing, I mean, gosh, no, there's still so many branches that I want to go into.
We got time.
We can
Branch
come on
out.
again.
Let's do it.
we can. We do both of those. All right, let's see where we go here for the last few minutes. And then yes, we'll book another call. But the just you mentioned earlier Bruce Lipton and you know, biology belief in his work with Greg Braden there and everything. I really got so much value out of his work specifically, especially biology of belief, because it's that like when you tell yourself I am an amazing writer or a powerful creator in whatever capacity, the repetition of that phrase, saying that, facilitates a trigger within your DNA, of your DNA actually like providing those codes or activating or turning on those codices or codons to be able for you to actually channel that and do that. And I think I almost want to attribute, like when I was a kid, I remember just having this feeling. I was like, I don't know, but I feel like I'm supposed to do something big, you know, and that was it. That was like my understanding of myself. I remember and
go on.
You are a princess.
You are an Egyptian princess.
Hey, thank you.
And I think that as we like, I mean, one for training for raising kids, right, as a new generation of children in the future, and also for evolving our own consciousness, that repetitive pattern, even if you, as you said, you say it to yourself and then you don't believe it, you know, I'm not a good writer because it like that kind of holds you down. But by just powering through it, saying like, no, I can write. The more that you tell yourself that, the more that you sink into that feeling, the more confident you become to do it. And it's like that whole idea of, right, it's like you are just spirit, subject, you know, experiencing itself. And you are also spirit, and everyone that you meet is spirit. I think that overcomes, or sinking into that can help you overcome a sense of any lack of courage that you might be facing, right? If there's whether it's putting out a video on the internet that's putting yourself out there, or just talking to, maybe there's a cute girl or a cute guy that you want to like say hello to, right? Like that, the feeling of like, oh, what if I'm rejected, kind of is overcome in the face of like, she's me. He's me. I can talk to myself, you know. And
quote. I think that also goes back to languaging, as you talked about, like as you say those things to yourself. And I work with this so much because I nerd out on this languaging piece. Is truly like, you know, even when you're telling yourself, yeah, no, I'm a good writer, I can do this. If you language it instead as like, you know, reinforcing what you have done, that can totally open up those DNA passages even more, you know, like with my children, since you brought up the kid raising thing, you know, as opposed to being like, wow, you behaved really well today. It's more along the lines of like, you really focused today. You sat down and you followed through with the thing that you said you were going to do. And if you
only once,
right. And if you leverage that with yourself, specifically around the things that you're trying to overcome, and really, instead of just being like saying those things that, you know that instantly it triggers disbelief, instead language it into, hey, I did do this today. I actually wrote 10,000 words. Who cares if it's good or not? I wrote this. I sat down and I committed to writing what I said I was going to write today, and like reinforcing the positive things about the stuff that you actually have done. And then you can start to be like, hey, what I wrote was really, really good because it came from my heart, or it had the right energy, even if the words weren't right or whatever that is. And then you can work through those blocks around your creativity that way in a huge thing. And specifically with writer's block, it's very rarely about your actual writing. It's about some other block that you're experiencing, about some other part of your life, you know, to work through. But that languaging piece can really help leverage and open those DNA doorways.
Dude, good for you. I think that is like, I think I've gotten so much from this podcast today. Like so many of these things that like things like we're talking about, oh, I was thinking about that the other day, or I was thinking about that earlier, you know, like this has really been very enlightening. Thanks for coming up to your TED Talk. But I keep seeing Bart Simpson like writing on the chalkboard. He's like, I will not say I'm a bad writer ever again. You know, like I just keep saying, I was like, oh, 90s, hi.
Apparently that show's still going too, actually.
Yeah,
he's probably still writing on the chalkboard.
Right, I know. Right, but it's like, don't trust your government, kids. Some subliminal shit.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Predicting the future every episode.
Right, witches. I mean, well, then it brings up the Hollywood thing again. It's like, I mean, some things there's no way that you can like compare, like there's like with the Donald Trump and the sign falling and the escalator, you know, it's like there's no way that could have been like orchestrated.
Okay, wait. I have a theory about that one specifically.
Cool, come on.
Okay,
there are some that are definitely like a little bit like suspect, no question.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
No, there's a stretch.
There's a lot of cartoons that have like announcing that the Twin Towers are going to fall, like pre 9/11.
Heard
that one is interesting. However, the Simpsons one, I wonder if Donald Trump is very theatrical, and that after the Simpsons made that thing, when Donald Trump, no question, he was running he just paid some kid to drop a sign at a specific moment.
I hope so. I don't even care. I hope so.
He's so
I would
probably.
I mean, even to the extent that, and now I don't want to try and credit or discredit any particular conspiracy movement. Of course, there's the whole QAnon is a very big and demonized movement, which in my mind gives it credibility, actually, because it's like, why would, you know, it's like the Plandemic movie. This movie comes out, and honestly, this YouTube video now, this one here that we're filming, is going to get taken down because I've talked about Plandemic so much. But just like, why would the mainstream media go out of its way to demonize this thing so much, to such an extent? And you guys are frozen. I don't know if you're going to come back, but I'm recording, so I'm just going to finish this thought and then we'll see what happens.
Okay, we're back.
We're back. Okay. So why would the mainstream narrative demonize this thing so much if it was just complete nonsense, right? And so it's the same thing, I think, with like the QAnon and Trump energy of, like, you know, Trump coming in and like doing all of, you know, this kind of secret work that he's doing to like disband the global cabal and everything like that.
It's an interesting thought, man.
It's a very interesting thing, but why would, if there was nothing to it, if there was no substance there, why would the mainstream care?
Fight it so hard.
Fight it so hard. Why would like 25 plus different networks all have the same speech describing verbatim the you know, like that this is this hogwash story? It seems too
I'm with you.
Carefully put together. It's strange. It's a little weird.
God, it'd be so frustrating to be a journalist right now, because if you are seeking out truth, and, you know, you really like got into this to have truth, and then there's all of these different things at play, like that would be so just ridiculously frustrating for that. I mean, we're all trying to figure out our truth in that way.
And that you'd be out of a job if you tried to say something against the mainstream narrative.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
And then thinking about what is the mainstream narrative, and if the mainstream narrative, but if you
going in the
like,
dictionary,
I mean, like that goes back with having the ability to question the things that a lot of people close to you don't like. There's a level of indoctrination that I feel like I'm being awoken to right now, that plays on our necessity and desire for compassion because we're good people. And that's a whole, like, I don't know, that's a whole thing about what truth is and where you stand and where you're allowed to speak out and be like, people be like, no, I defend everyone's ability to speak out what they're saying until you speak out against what they're saying too.
Except that. Yeah.
Right.
Except anything that's within this long
right?
box.
Because these are the right things,
Yeah.
And it's hard, man. This is the shadow work that we're doing though. Maybe that's why we're here. I'm gonna get your hair secure now.
Man. Yes.
So much.
This has been awesome. I'm thrilled, dude. We're gonna have a great day.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like, oh my God, I'm torn between kind of keeping this ball rolling now and bringing it to a close. There's like did we talk about the last time on your podcast that I appeared on? Did we talk about the social dilemma?
Nope, we can.
We didn't really. I think we touched on it very briefly, but I don't think we dived in very much further.
I haven't watched all of it, so I'll be upfront with that. As I think I fell asleep to most of it, and but I can talk with it.
Well, it's the same problem that you're describing is even found in this movie. Like, I really appreciated this movie up until the very end. So I guess you would have missed this part, but it's so good about revealing the challenges of the main what's going on with social media and putting people in a bubble and disconnecting each other from different narratives and different ideas, people reinforcing their belief system by seeing the same thing. And then out of nowhere, that movie takes a turn into conspiracy world and basically says all the conspiracies are ridiculous, but people are just believing them because the social media, is putting that narrative in front of them and they believe it. And that's why, Facebook is cracking down on fake news.
Oh my God. So it's bought by Facebook. Holy shit.
And they were like, oh, well, the whole, and they went with like flat earth and like, they might have mentioned QAnon and stuff. And they were like, well, the algorithm started showing the flat earth to everyone and now everyone believes it. And just basically blaming the algorithm for like every conspiracy theory, and ended up becoming a movie that was like purporting still like go and support the mainstream narrative, and it was just like, wow, like why was that necessary in this movie?
Because they got you by the balls. Because my girlfriend
got you by the balls.
My girlfriend talked about that when I very first heard about it. She's like, no, I deleted all my Facebook apps. Like I did all this. And then I was like, all right, well then again, they're telling us not to trust the mainstream narrative by using the mainstream narrative with us, like saying like, yeah, but Netflix still is that program that is training us. You know what I mean? So how can we listen to something that's telling us not to believe something when they tell us to believe everything else? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they may tell us to question these things, but it's still it.
And even like just speaking to Netflix, I recently, for our conspiracy theory of everything, I had to go down some rabbit holes, and I watched the the Jeffrey Epstein Filthy Rich documentary on Netflix, which was, really fucking intense and very revealing. At the same time, though, that documentary makes it look like Jeffrey Epstein is a singular entity on its own.
Right.
And when you start going down there, you're like, oh, Hillary Clinton went to his both of the Clintons and like all of these celebrities and all these actors and movie directors
but
and
don't look at that part.
Famous people all have been to that, sex island. And that's not a part of that. It's like the movie doesn't encourage you to go down the rabbit hole and see how much bigger this gets. The narrative is, it's Epstein, he's dead, it's over. And maybe there's this conspiracy about him dying at the end, but otherwise case closed, and it's really like, that's no. And I think a lot of people get that, but I don't know that it's not a conversation that reaches the masses.
Yeah. And it, again, like everything else, it requires a certain level of like knowing that you're going to dive deeper and take this bigger and like go expand it and have that awakening and stuff within you also of like all these energetic concepts of having the awareness to be like, cool, this has to be bigger. Let me question even further instead of just being like, oh, I learned all I needed to.
Well, and then how far do you take it, man?
Well, that's just it too, yeah.
We don't know. And I think once again, that goes back to their plan. Like they feed us all this information and they know that certain things like Epstein and social dilemma, like these things are hot now. Like not to quote Zoolander, like they're so hot. Epstein's so hot right now.
Oh God.
But it's like I
wouldn't go there if I were you.
No, I was just saying like no.
No, it's a Zoolander. Come on, guys. I'm just saying.
I get it.
Hot topic.
I think that we're being I kind of forgot what else I was gonna say, but
we went down the hot train.
I know I tried to make a joke and you guys were like, don't do it. No, oh yeah, and then we have like all the other celebrities that like look at the singer of Linkin Park and Chris Cornell. They were said to have been working on a movie talking about this pedophilia thing too, this pedophilia ring, and that's why they were off, or that's why all these people are killing themselves.
Well, it's just, I mean, it just like, again, it goes bigger and bigger, but then at what level are you like, okay, yeah.
And we'll never freaking know, man.
Well, I just have to then put it out there as an energy, and actually I have been doing this like in my meditations, but I'm just like asking for a wave of protection, because we are talking about a lot of this stuff. We're talking about it with the conspiracy theory of everything, and part of what we're looking at too is like, okay, what is going to get us banned off of YouTube and what's not, and then kind of tailoring ourselves to not say like we're not going to talk about certain things, but certain things we only talk about behind closed doors, like in Spirit Conspiracies, which again is free for everybody, but it is on our private platform where it can't be taken down and it can't be banned. Yeah, and so certain conversations we can only have there, and then everything else is mostly fine on, you know, like talking about aliens and holographic reality and the evolution of technology and these kinds of things. That's all fine for YouTube. But yeah, certain conversations are very taboo and like put people at risk. There's a lot of, it was actually very frightening to me when I was going over the script on the 9, like we have one episode that is about the secret government, and we talk about 9/11, and there's all this section of like, this guy came forward with evidence that the buildings were a controlled demolition, and then he mysteriously ended up dead not long after. And I was going over the script being like, am I putting a target on the back of my head by doing this?
True.
Like, it seems like it's very important. It was divinely inspired. I felt very genuinely like this video had to be made. And I think that I have this sense of safety around it. And that's why I feel confident and trusting going into it. But there have been these feelings and frequencies of like, this is kind of getting into an uncharted territory. So I'll just put it out there as a definitive, because this is on video, it's going on the internet, that I'll say to my camera right here, if I mysteriously end up dead after posting conspiracy theory of everything, I didn't kill myself. Investigate it deeper, please.
Man.
Ideally, I'll be reborn as a being of light, and I'll come and, you know, help the world in maybe a mysterious, ethereal sort of way. Or maybe I'll come back. Ideally, I'll just put this out here too. Ideally, I'd like to, if and when I die, I'd like to retain. And when I die. If I went, well, because, you know, we're talking about ascension. Maybe we evolve into a species that death is different. Mm-hmm. And you're like, you can die whenever you want to. 1,000 years, that's cool. Like, that would be nice. But but if that doesn't happen, then when I die, I'd like to reincarnate with my memories intact. That is like the goal, because then you can come back and be like, oh yeah, it's just like it's like I reset the game, but I kept all of my points from the last save. You have all your
gear still.
I have all my gear. Yeah.
But you reset.
You could go crazy. You guys don't.
I mean,
or
maybe.
You're like, oh my God, what life am I at? You know?
What day is it? What time is it?
Right. Like, where are we? It's 1786. Just kidding. It's tomorrow. I'm just like kidding. Like, what is even? Thinking about.
I don't know if I'd want all my memories intact. I don't know if I would want to reincarnate as a human again, though. And I have the energetic sense, like the feeling that I don't know if I will incarnate as a human again. Like, it's that weird feeling that I had.
I could see you wanting to be a cat.
Meow. Actually, I've been allergic to cats for like my whole life. I did a bunch of energy healing on it, and I'm not anymore. So it's really funny that you said
that's me. I'm the cat one.
She's the cat.
You're a cat. Okay. Will you be a dog then?
My bunnies are right over there. I'm like, close your ears.
Okay.
Right. My little spirit animal, little mama. I guess in terms of what we're talking about saying things that might be dangerous, it's also like there's this song, I listen to a lot of what's called folk punk, and he said if music really changed the world, then music would be banned. And it's like, and I don't believe that, but we have to take that like onto another spectrum of maybe that's why they create like this level of friction. Like if something comes out and it's closer to the truth and the mainstream narrative, then that's why they're attacking it so much, you know? Like, I guess maybe that's like a trap towards what is true, if it's like being that rejected that strongly.
I think music changes the world, though. I think we have a lot more power to change the world than we anticipate ourselves having.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the topic of it. Like if something really changed the world, they wouldn't let it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, unless it was really out of their power. Like it was like,
Sure.
I think if for lack of a better word, if the hand of God reached in to humanity and facilitated a spark of light, a spark of awareness, there's nothing that anyone could do. If like miraculous awakening that transpires within humanity, again, like there's nothing you can do except then fight it after the fact, which is probably what happened. Which is why like movies like the Plandemic came out at all. It was only after it came out that it was suddenly a problem.
Sure. Yeah, man.
Yeah. And the work we do on individual levels, that's another thing that can't necessarily be, I mean, you can go deep individually and experience truth and open your energy and figure out how your energy impacts other people's energy and all that stuff on individual spaces. And that's a little bit different, and you can have a big impact with that without having it be controlled necessarily on certain levels.
And that's what we have to, I mean, in some ways that's what we kind of have to believe, or we have to like remind ourselves because of this energetic thing. I think anytime that I start becoming kind of like skeptical, or if I start kind of falling away from this level of certainty in my spirituality, that I return back to like quantum physics or watching these movies, and they kind of like spark that fire underneath your ass again and be like, all right, well, remember, like you're just getting stuck in the details, and that we can allow ourselves to let go of all these details, and we don't need to like take note of all of them and remember all of them. So that like that level of control.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's super true. Back to that, just surrender, let go.
Sure.
It'll flow through you. Yeah.
Man. Wow.
Amazing. Well, we've covered like a lot of ground today.
Yeah.
We have.
This has been very cool.
It's been super cool. Thank you both so much for coming on.
Thank you for having us. It was really fun.
Yeah, we're happy to be here.
Yeah. And we'd love to come talk with you again. That would be great.
And you can come back on our show too. We'd love to have you back on.
Definitely. We'll hook it
Just
up.
Just a patch.
So with that said, if for anybody who's tuning in and wants to find you guys, where can we find you?
Absolutely.
Everywhere.
So yeah, our podcast
we're everywhere.
We're all over.
All of the
in
like
you.
Right. We are you.
Our podcast is called Perceptionists Anonymous, and it's a metaphysical comedy podcast. And Jordan has been a guest on it really recently, and that was a very fantastic episode. But we're on all podcast apps and places, your Spotify, your iTunes, all of that.
Pandora, iHeart,
Anchor, the whole 9 yards. And then of course on our socials. So we have Instagram, Perceptionists Anonymous, Facebook, Perceptionists Anonymous.
our email.
You can email us at perceptionistanonymous@gmail.com if you have questions or anything like that. And yeah, so that's where our podcast is.
Thank you very much, man. We're so what a blessing to be here.
Yeah, it's a blessing to have you guys. Thank you so much, and be well. And that's a wrap, everybody. Thank you for watching and listening in, and see you next time.